from a long-term needs point of view, in a couple of years, they may not be able to access it. So that's what we have to think about there. We also have to think about the fact that they're not suitable for wheeled commodes or wheeled shower chairs. So if somebody is using a wheeled piece of equipment, obviously they're not going to be suitable for the shower cubicle or the low-level access showers. In my experience, sometimes a shower cubicle or a low-level shower has to be considered due to drainage issues, maybe in blocks of flats, high-rise towers and so on. So it may be a structural issue that actually means we need to do this. But again, it has to meet the need. So thinking about moving on to a level access shower. So as you can see, it doesn't have a step or a lip to enter the shower area. And generally speaking, people of all ages and mobility levels can enter the shower with relative ease, either with a mobility aid or with mobility equipment, such as a wheeled shower chair. So thinking about what the indicators may be for a level access shower, we think about medical conditions and thinking about if somebody has a condition such as MS or motor neurone disease, where actually we know that it's simply a waste of funds and not a suitable option to meet the long-term needs if we went for any of the previous options. So from a clinical reasoning point of view, the level access shower is the most suitable option. We also look at, again, if we know that perhaps there may be another person in the property and we're looking at a dual need situation, we may have one person that could use a cubicle, but also somebody else that we know needs a level access shower. Clearly, we would go for the level access shower. Something else to perhaps bear in mind about a level access shower is we perhaps need to weigh up whether, from an energy conservation and a pacing point of view, if somebody could use one of the earlier options that I've mentioned, but actually it leaves them totally exhausted, and it means that they then couldn't carry on with other activities of daily living, such as climbing the stairs, cooking a meal, getting dried and dressed afterwards, all things that we include in our activity analysis. If somebody can't actually do that because the effort of using bathing equipment or using a shower cubicle is such that it leaves them exhausted, we do also need to look at that. And again, it's part of our clinical reasoning. I think that's a really important thing to consider, because I think in some situations we may actually think they can just about use bathing equipment. It's a bit of a struggle, but actually that bit of a struggle can be quite significant for somebody. So that is really something to keep in mind. Obviously with the wet room, as you can see, I'm sure I would imagine that many of you have seen wet rooms before where we don't have any tray, and again, a wet room is a suitable option for meeting all needs really, and it gives you that little bit more space as well. We need to think about, with a wet room, about the graded floor, obviously for the water to run away, and the impact that that may have if you are using equipment. So the gradient of the shower floor area has to be so that the shower seat or the shower stall is stable and safe for the customer. Okay, so that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the different types of showers. But as with everything, we've used our clinical reasoning. We look at what the most suitable option is. We take into account customers' needs, other people in the property, and again, thinking about how long this adaptation will meet the person's needs for. With everything we do, we have to remember that we should be meeting long-term needs. And also just a little touch on the DFG eligibility. We need to make sure that it's necessary and appropriate. So the necessary, is our clinical assessment. Does the person actually need it? Is it appropriate to do it? And is it reasonable and practicable? So is it technically possible? The practicable side of it, could it be actually, it's necessary, it's appropriate, but from a practical point of view, the person lives on a 10-storey flat with access issues. So that's when you're considering your practical section. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so on the next slide, we've got just a couple of pictures of a shower toilet cubicle and a dryer adaptation. And again, these may not be adaptations that you see commonplace, not as much as you'll see a level access shower, but again, it's just highlighting that these are solutions that are available. So when you look at the toilet shower cubicle, it is a good solution for some situations. So a case study of when this may be suitable is perhaps where you have somebody that lives downstairs, lives in a large bedroom. They live all in one space in this bedroom. They've perhaps been doing it for a little while, and they have Parkinson's disease. And based on their condition, using your clinical reasoning, you've ruled out a stair lift to get to the bathroom upstairs. So therefore, you're ruling out a stair lift, which means that you're not going to adapt the bathroom upstairs. So quite a good solution in that situation could be to have a shower toilet cubicle, as you see in the first picture. So that would mean that the person would have access to the shower and the toilet facilities in their existing bedroom, almost like an ensuite, really. So that's just an example of where they could be used. I have worked in cases before where perhaps the person might have is in palliative care, and perhaps time is a bit of an issue, but also perhaps there may not be a particular need for a permanent adaptation as in changing the bathroom. So have known these to be used in palliative care cases as well. It could also be considered when somebody needs to be close to the toilet or needs to be close to a shower. Again, this is all in our clinical reasoning. But again, it's just making you aware of the options that are available. The second picture is a dryer. So again, not something we perhaps see very often, but it's just highlighting that these are items that are available in bathroom adaptations. So this could be used for when conventional towel drying isn't an option for the person. So a case example of this could be a plus size person that perhaps has skin folds that could have resulted in a skin condition, which means drying may be difficult and maybe aggravate a skin condition. So that's a case example where I've known a dryer system to be used. They're very effective. They do dry the whole of the body rather quickly. And again, thinking about skin conditions, it may be that again, if somebody has a particularly severe skin condition, such as severe eczema or psoriasis, then a drying solution such as this may be an option. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just thinking about the size of the bathroom adaptation. So we obviously need to look at the footprint of the bathroom and consider the turning circle of the movement. We need to think about the person completing the task, as in their build. Are they a plus size person? What assistance do they have, and so on. And obviously we need to think of the space available in the bathroom. and the existing footprint of the bath. We also need to consider carer assistance as well. If somebody has carer assistance in the shower, so it may be that you would look for a bigger footprint, a bigger size area for the shower if you know that somebody is a plus size person and has a larger piece of equipment and also has a carer to assist. So the measurements on the screen, the 800 by 1300 mil is a standard bath replacement tray. The second one, 1000 by 1000, is generally used for somebody who's mobile and is perhaps going to be seated in the shower. The 1200 by 1200 is generally for a static shower chair, if you need to use a static shower chair in the shower. The larger size, 1500 by 1500, would generally be considered when you're looking at a larger tilting space shower chair, which we'll come to a couple of slides down. Or it may be that you need a shower cradle or a trolley in there. But generally, if you're using 1500 by 1500, it will be because you need a larger piece of equipment. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so shower screens and door solutions. Okay, so when we think about the shower screens, if we look at what's on the picture, when we're looking at half-height shower screens, we're predominantly thinking about the care and need for this. So if the person is having carer assistance, obviously we don't want the carer to get soaked. They need to be able to lean over to help the person. Also, we don't want the water to flood out, obviously because of the obvious health and safety issues. So the half-height fixed shower screens give safe access for carer support. Screens keep the screens keep the water inside. On the middle picture, the second picture, you've also got a mobile shower screen. Again, these tend to be less popular because they tend generally not to be as flood secure as the fixed shower screens, but sometimes people find it a little bit cumbersome to move around, got to find somewhere to store them, etc. But again, it's just highlighting that there is an option. Standard fixed shower screen that you or I might have in our property, we generally do not recommend them simply because of the safety and the entrapment risk. It impedes the access for carers as well. So if you're thinking about carer support and thinking about, if you picture that third photo, if you picture somebody in there that needs carer support, it would be very difficult for somebody to actually get in and help them. And it also can impede access for equipment as well. So we don't offer full height glass shower doors and screens, generally speaking. Again, you may be in a situation where somebody wants to buy their own and have them fitted, but from an OT point of view, generally it's not a recommendation. Okay, and with the shower curtains, again, different authorities can have different provisions. And I know recently there's been a video shared about shower screens and about why we wouldn't use them. Watched that just yesterday, and some of you may have seen it. But yes, but shower curtains generally a little bit frowned upon, but sometimes perhaps personal preference, somebody might want those, but again, they could be used in conjunction with half-height shower screens as per the first photo. Okay, next screen, please. Okay, so we've talked about the footprint, we've talked about the different types of showers, we've talked about our shower screens. So now we need to think about our shower seating. So again, Our clinical reasoning will help us decide what type of shower seat or stool we actually require. Again, in some organisations there might be standard preferences, but when we look at the options on the screen, our wall-mounted shower seats are generally for when you might have ambulant people who are also going to be using the shower, so that the seat can be popped up out of the way and give access to other family members that are using the area too. The drop-down shower seats can be an option. However, you do have to consider stability, you have to consider the weight of the person, and generally speaking, a plus size person is unlikely to be able to use a drop down shower seat, but they can be an option for some situations. And again, I'm aware that some local authorities and some boroughs fit these as standard, and some don't fit them at all. So again, local preferences. When we think about static shower seats, is a quick, easy option, and can also be changed for different types of seating if needs change. So as opposed to a wall-mounted shower seat, which is then fixed, if you've got your removable static shower seat or stool and needs change, it's easy just to pop that out and change for a suitable one. Okay, so we also need to think about whether we need a back support on the chairs, or do we need hand support on the side. We need to consider sitting balance and trunk control, because obviously to sit on a shower stool, as we can see on the top of the first two pictures, on a shower stool or a shower stool with arms, you have to have a degree of sitting balance. We also have the more specialist shower chairs, where you might have a commode pan underneath. That might be an identified need. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so looking at a standard freeway shower chair and commode, and a tilting space shower chair. So again, with the great freeway shower chair on the left, we see an attendant propelled one on the slide. So again, something that is fairly easy to add accessories to that are needed. And we would consider this if an attendant propelled shower chair is required. And again, you can pop the commode pan under those seats. The chair on the right is a tilting space chair, where you might be considering that somebody hasn't got adequate trunk control, or they have a particularly clinically complex situation where you may need to use one of these. So again, the tilting space shower chairs provide excellent postural management, and you can have the add-ons such as the thoracic support, the lateral support, foot straps, and so on, calf straps, again a commode pan. But your clinical reasoning will guide you to which type of shower chair you need. But just a note here that whichever shower chair you consider, you need to make sure you've got space for it. So when I mentioned a couple of slides ago about the footprint and the larger footprint of 1500 by 1500, you may need to be considering that if you're using the tilting space shower chair. Also, just to note that both of these types of chairs do have a plus size range as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, shower heads and hoses. So something that we probably take for granted, is just quite a simple component to the shower really, but compared to everything else that we've talked about. But it is important, and it is something that you have to consider. So again, thinking about people that may have sensory issues that actually don't want to have the shower running down over their head, particularly if you're prescribing for a child. You need to consider the pressure of the water, the impact of water coming down on somebody's face and head. So if you are aware through your clinical assessment that that's something that that you have to consider, or your assessment tells you that there is a specific sensory need, you need to think about the type of shower head. You also need to think about the length of hose, particularly if you have a carer support, because if the carer is taking the shower hose, the shower head off the main unit to shower the person, then the shower hose is going to need to be long enough to be able to do that. Generally speaking, you'd be looking at a 2-metre shower hose to enable a carer to shower somebody. But again, different situations might dictate different different shower lengths. Also think about people who may have some dexterity issues, and whether you may need to consider a different type of shower head for any reason. Again, this is all your clinical assessment, but you need to think about how the person is going to grip that as needed, and thinking about the height and the attachments that are required. If you have somebody that is particularly tall in height, or if they have a medical condition that means they are small in height, then you will obviously want the shower head to be lower, else by the time the water reaches them, it's not going to be that warm. So they're just points to consider, because some people perhaps may see it as, it's just a shower head, but actually it's really important. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, flooring. Now, again, generally speaking, when we think about wet rooms and level access shower rooms, generally speaking, you'd be thinking about perhaps alto flooring, and that's what perhaps we all may know as the option that we use. So what we have to consider is that the floor needs to be non-slip. So we could be looking at alto flooring, we could be looking at non-slip matting, but as I say, the most common option is to have the alto flooring within the adaptation. The picture on the right with the white tapes, again, we need to think about whether there's any sensory issues, any contrast issues, and again, colour might come into this, visual impairment, and so on. So the white tapes on the floor are particularly useful for enabling somebody to feel where they're standing, so they know particularly where they are standing in the bathroom, and also helping with beg your pardon, just froze there for a second. Helping with the grip of somebody when they're actually coming out of the shower. So if you identify that somebody needs additional grip coming out, then the white taping is also an option. But it's most commonly considered when you do have a sensory issue or a visual impairment. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, shower unit. So we've spoke about the shower hose and the shower head. So when you think about the shower unit, again, you need to think about the height, the type, and how it's going to be controlled. If somebody has dexterity issues, are they going to be able to use the standard shower dial to switch it on? Do they need a push button? All very important parts of your considerations, your adaptation. And again, thinking, does somebody need a grab rail located near to it as well to enable them to use it? But what I would say with the shower unit is, again, your contractors might have different options, but always make sure that the person is going to be able to use it. So there may be a standard spec, or there may be a standard local preference, but you have to make sure, obviously, that your customer is going to be able to reach it, they're going to be able to switch it on and off, and they're going to be able to control the temperature, and it actually meets their needs fully. Also, water pressure considerations here. So when the shower unit is fitted, there has to be an option to have a discussion or consideration about the water pressure and whether it can actually, whether it's compatible with that shower unit. Again, thinking about high-rise flats, tower blocks, sometimes the water pressure can be an issue. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, other considerations. Small pieces of equipment that some of you may have seen before. So we're thinking about here about flood detectors. So if you know that somebody has an issue where they may not be aware if there's a flood, or they may be prone to behavioural issues that may result in them leaving the shower running, so on and so on. So flood detectors are an option to consider. Also thinking about if somebody has a need for an alarm pull, such as the picture on the right. Again, not something that is commonly prescribed, but it's just a consideration. Also, when you're thinking about a bath, if you are providing a bath, thinking about a magic plug that will actually release the water away if the tap is left running. Again, you can find details of those online, but they're just options to consider. So thinking about the flood risk, thinking about the safety issues. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've spoken about quite a lot already about what you need to include in your shower screen, but here are just a few more points. So obviously we need to think about the access inside the bathroom, and how they're going to get to the bathroom. There's no point adapting our bathroom if they can't get up the stairs and we can't provide a stair lift. So a door width and type of door. Does the door need to open to the right, to the left? Is it going inwards? Is it going outwards? Does the person fall? Do they need to have the door opening outwards, so that if they do fall near the door, somebody can still get in? As we've already discussed, we think about the flooring and the fall of the flooring, drainage and water pressures, layouts, hazards, thinking about people maybe who have dementia or a visual impairment, structure, integrity of the actual room, and if we're having grab rails, is there a suitable wall to put them on? Heating, light, ventilation, do we have any damp issues? Do they need addressing? And vision, contrast, thinking about the colour of grab rails, the colour of flooring, the colour of toilet seats. Again, lots of information on the DLF website about that, very, very useful. Use of equipment we've already talked about, but we also need to consider toilet equipment. And we also need to think about the impact of change and others in the home. So earlier on when we was talking about the drop-down shower seat, for example, that's an example of considering other people who are in the home that are going to be using the shower. And then also we need to think about our plus-size customers that may need additional adaptations or additional considerations within their adaptations. So obviously there are lots of things to consider in your shower scheme, but that's just an overview of your main points to consider. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so again, we've spoken about seating, but type and location of rails, again, thinking of contrast, whether you need a different colour rail, but also where do you actually need them? By the toilet, in the shower, height, position, and so on. The shower unit we've considered, again, care assistance. If somebody does need care in the shower, this must be considered in your adaptation. Okay, the privacy, that is just thinking about, you know, is there a window that may need changing because it's an open, a clear glass, it may need to be changed for opaque glass. Okay, and we've considered the shower location of the tray. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now, lastly, I'm just going to touch on bathing. So now, again, bathing can be a little bit of a quite a hot topic to discuss, and if we had more time and we were in a classroom situation, we would have quite a healthy debate on this, I'm sure. But you know, in some situations, a bath may be required, and you know, and again, we have to consider that bathing in some situations may be a solution, particularly with children. But what we have to consider is the impact of that. So again, what is the clinical need for a bath? And thinking of, you know, your clinical reasoning with the health condition, would it meet the needs long term, or would it meet the needs for now, but actually if the condition changed, they wouldn't be able to access it? And that is obviously the main thing that local authorities would generally look at, is if you're going to provide a bath, would it meet a long-term need? Perhaps consider, I mean, are they value for money? They can cost, you know, sort of generally between 1,000 and 3,000 for a sort of standard bath like you see in the top left picture, but equally some can cost a lot more. But when you look at the height difference on the pictures on the slide, you know, you can see the height difference that's needed to actually get into that adaptive bath compared to the low-level shower trays that you see on the slide, and the wet room where there is no lip. But we do have to think about, would they meet the needs long term? And again, in some cases they may, like I say, particularly with children. Next slide, please. Okay, just an example here of a range of adaptive baths, and some of you may have already seen some of these. I suppose some points for consideration are, when you look at the top left-hand picture, once the person is seated in the bath, they have to actually wait for that bath to fill up. So consideration would be, would they become cold? Would that make them clinically vulnerable? Would that be a difficulty? You know, in a lot of cases, possibly yes. But when you look at the picture in the bottom right-hand corner, they're the most commonly used baths that you may see in nursing homes and a care home setting. So for those of you that work in care homes or nursing homes, residential settings, they're the type of baths you may see there, that are normally for carer assistance. But again, you also have to think about how somebody's going to get in and out of a bath, whether they need postural support once they're in the bath, such as a seating cushion. Do they need hoisted into the bath, or need ceiling track hoist? There's lots and lots of considerations. Generally speaking, in my experience, I've considered baths for children's cases, and it is part of a DFG adaptation. So it's not that we can't do them, but it's just like anything else, it needs careful consideration. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so again, I've just touched on a couple of these points already. So again, we have to think about how somebody can transfer in and out of a bath, their posture, their trunk control, any uncontrolled movements. Do they need assistance? Are there any safety issues? You know, if you had somebody with a condition that meant they experienced seizures or jerking movements of the body. You particularly have to think about that when getting in and out of a bath, and particularly if we're having a hoist situation like we see in the picture. So there is much to consider with bathing, but again, it's not something that you rule out. And and particularly with considerations within the Care Act as well. So, but it's just on this slide, it's just points to consider if you are looking at a bath. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as with all solutions, we have to remember that within providing the DFG for a bathroom adaptation, the solution has to be reasonable, practicable, and appropriate and necessary. Okay. And I do believe that's my last slide. Any questions?
Thank you very much. You'd think I would have managed this by now, but I muted myself. So apologies, everybody. You have a picture of a man in a green top muting himself. Got a couple of questions, Louise. Thank you so much for that. I'm very in depth, lots of information. And thank you to everyone in the chat box helping each other out. So Sally's just mentioned that a few people have said they'd like just to run through the chat box at the end. So once I've asked Louise and Claire the questions, we won't shut down the system yet. We'll give you a couple of minutes and then we'll warn you, and then if you could all leave when you're ready, that will be fab, and we'll be able to continue from there. So a couple of questions, Louise. We'll start off. Somebody said they'd like to understand more about gradients with level access. Obviously, we need more details into that. So I would suggest if they drop us an email, if they've got some questions specifically about gradients and level access, Louise and Claire can come back to you with that. So we have the question, but obviously we haven't got the time to run through everything about gradients. Where are the strips on the floor from? Obviously in the picture, Louise, you had the tape. Is it tape or was it, what were the strips in your slide?
Yes, so that is just white tape, and the white tape that I've seen in the past was actually from, I do believe it was from Nottingham Rehab Supplies, within the visual impairment section. But also
NRS. Sorry, NRS do have them. I think that's where that picture came from, to be honest. And if you check out Living Made Easy, I think you'll be able to find there's a few on Living Made Easy as well. If you just drop to the website and Google it, search within the website.
Superb, thank you very much. A few people have already answered this question in the chat box, but can a shower be voice controlled? And then I'm going to chuck something extra in, Louise, because you are an active practicing OT. Have you ever, under a DFG, put systems in to voice control a shower or a bathroom?
Sorry, could you say that again, Stuart? Sorry.
So can a shower be voice controlled? The answer is obviously yes, and a few people have answered that in the chat box. But have you got any examples, or have you in your current workplace ever used disabled facilities grant money to use telecare or to connect to the shower or a pump or anything like that, voice control wise?
Sorry, Stuart, you're saying voice control, aren't you?
That's what it is. It's that Welsh accent. I think what he's asking, Louise, is whether or not you've had experience. If you've had experience of having DFG funding for pieces of kit like the voice activated shower or other telecare solutions.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Yes, I haven't personally, but I am aware of situations in a previous role where they have been used, and it was procured via DFG funding. But in my current role, I haven't. But I would imagine it is a possibility.
Super. Would you envisage, because an Alexa and a basic system is less than £1,000. I know legislation and adaptations with a delay, lots of things have been reviewed, but would you envisage going through a disabled facilities grant process for that? Or would you presume that a local authority could just fund that because it was an assessed need?
Yeah, I think, again, perhaps depend on localised policies and procedures, but it possibly could be considered as part of a wider DFG scheme, or it could be considered as a standalone under £1,000 sort of minor adaptation. So again, it would depend on local policy and procedure. Yeah, I'm aware that some people would include it, in the overall cost of a DFG scheme.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a few more questions. What is the difference between a level access shower and a wet room?
Okay, so with your wet room, you are sorry, we haven't got the slides up still, but we've got the wet room where there isn't any tray, whereas with the level access shower, you do still have the tray in place, sort of under the flooring. But with the wet room, which is a completely a completely wet area, but you'll also have your graded floor as well.
Fabulous. So Jason's just popped. If you look at the question slide, you will see I think that should be in front of you, but you will be able to see the black flooring, and that will give you an idea. But again, these handouts will be sent out to everybody afterwards, so they'll be able to take some reference on that. Just a couple more questions. What development needs are there for children, which will mean they need a bath? Why would a shower not be sufficient for a child?
Okay, so I mean, I can use a current example actually, that myself and a colleague are working on at the moment as a good example of where we have included a specialist bath within the adaptation, quite a complex adaptation, I have to say, but we had, because in my service we have the assessment comes from the children's OT service. So the children's OT had provided quite a comprehensive assessment that indicated the need for a bath rather than a shower due to the child's sensory issues. So so there was clear evidence that the child had quite a complex sensory situation, which meant that he would not tolerate a shower. Mum had tried to sort of introduce a shower by using a shower head for a few seconds at a time, using water with the child, but the evidence showed that actually the sensory situation was so complex that water being sort of poured on the skin or coming down on the skin couldn't actually be tolerated. So that's why in that situation we are actually providing a bath, and obviously bathing it's a child's development need, isn't it? Children, if they like to play in a bath, and for this child it was a significant part of his routine, and something that was important to mum as well, in her role as a mum, and having that time with her child to be able to bathe him. But the overwhelming reason for providing a bath there was more around the complex sensory situation.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. We've run out of time. We've got a couple of other questions, so thank you. We won't go through them anymore because we do promise everyone, because it's the lunch break, it will be the hour, and I appreciate we started a couple of minutes late, hence I've allowed it to run over. But I won't shut everything down now. Please feel free to pop your questions in the chat box. And I know a few people wanted to check some links and stuff, so we'll leave that for about 2 more minutes, just so people can get through and just message each other about things that they were querying. The question, we've got a couple of other questions about flooring, the difference between non-slip and anti-slip and things like that. And we've got some questions around shower cubicles, the tray lip, and also being able to put shower cubicles into things like barges, boats, and caravans and motorhomes and things. So obviously, we're not going to have time to give a fully comprehensive answer. But we will come back to everybody with that information within the next week. If you give us about a week to send the presentation, the links off DLF, and answer all your questions, we will do so. So if there's any last minute questions, please pop them in the chat box. You are free to email me again, Stuart at promoting-independence.co.uk. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Louise for coming on board today and running this session for us. It's really good to have occupational therapists who are practicing, who are seeing these problems day in, day out, and who are recommending adaptations, because it's nice to have the realism of what's going on out there now, and be able to give that information. And I think we've had just shy of 500 people today who've been listening in, which is excellent because we've enabled people to learn a lot. I'd like to just hand everyone over to Claire for just some closing remarks, if I may. And once again, thank you very much from Stuart, me, and I'll speak to you for session 3 next month.
Thank you, Stuart. And just to say again, reiterate what Stuart said, thank you everybody for joining us, and a big thank you to Louise for delivering that. You did a marvellous job, especially with the situation of having to do everything through a virtual means is quite new to all of us still. So I think you did fabulous. So thank you so much. We will be sending out the presentations and information. We did have a few issues from the last lot because of Christmas. I think it was a bit of a delay. And I also think some people haven't received the email. So by all means, if you were on the last webinar as well and you still haven't received anything, get in touch. Our email is currently on screen, or was on screen. It's inquiries@dlf.org.uk, and anything else, if you're interested in booking the training, please just come to us at inquiries@dlf.org.uk. But thanks again, and thank you, Stuart, for hosting.